Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about contraction in the economy and the measures that needs to be taken by the government in order to make sure that people are not the sufferers. What is contraction in the economy? We have something called as the business cycle. What is this business cycle? You have increase or expansion when it comes to the economy in some sectors, and there will also be dip in the market where there will be a gradual decline in the economic activities in the economy. Such decline in the economic activities is what is called as the contraction. So what are the implications? When it comes to the contraction in the economy, we will have economic hardships. People will not be able to find the jobs, and there will also be job losses as well. And it is at this time what we will witness is decreased productivity. This article therefore focuses on all those sectors which has seen a contraction when it comes to the economic activity. It also makes a point as well. What is that? Let's say for example, we have multiple sectors like the construction sector, like the travel sector, like the tourism sector, manufacturing and mining as well. These are the sectors which houses number of people, and it also gives jobs to the number of people as well. But now because of COVID-19, it is this particular sectors that are suffering maximum. So for example, when we are speaking about the construction sector, there is maximum layoff. Why? Because people are not constructing or new activities are not taking place. Then let's look at the tourism sector. People are not traveling, people have restrictions as well. They are not able to move to a different country or to a different state. Why? Because of certain travel restrictions imposed by the government in India as well as in the world over as well. And there is another important factor of manufacturing as well. Because there is very less demand, because there is also less activity in the economy, there is drop in the manufacturing as well. All this has resulted in job losses as well as unemployment crisis. This is where the author brings in the concept of what is called as vulnerable employment. So what is this vulnerable employment? Basically, all those people who are working in insecure and vulnerable conditions, whose job fluctuates when it comes to the business cycle, is what is called as the vulnerable employment. They have inadequate earnings, they have very low productivity, and they work in difficult conditions, and this can also snatch away or undermine the fundamental rights of the working employees as well. They are very less likely to have any formal arrangements, whether it is the social security scheme, whether it is the PF, or voicing through the effective organizations like the trade unions or similar organizations which is voicing their opinion in the general public. This might be present in general scenarios, but this is stripped off for all these people who have been working in such organizations. So inadequate earnings, low productivity and difficult conditions are some of the important features of the vulnerable employment, and these people do not have much of social security scheme, and their working conditions are not decent as well. Now let's look at some of the statistics as given under this article. According to the International Labour Organization, of the 535 million labor force in India in 2019, some 398.6 million will have poor quality jobs. The poor quality of jobs and high informality are key for the high level of working poor or those living on incomes of less than 198 in a day. These statistics clearly reveal that India might have increased its growth, might be in the last one decade or so, but is it reflecting in creating the jobs? Even if it is creating the jobs, is it creating formal employment or is it creating vulnerable employment? The answer to this is vulnerable employment. Why? Let's look at how it is in India right now. When it comes to the economic transformation, there has to be a gradual movement when it comes to the economic activities from low to the high value added sectors. So what are these low value sectors? This includes informal sector where there is no social security, where there is no PF, there is no fixed amount that which is given to a person. So they are only languishing in the informal sector. But what is a high value added sector? Where you are entering a formal sector where there is periodic upgradation, you have hikes, you also have a fixed salary when it comes to the high value added sector. This can be in the form of chemical industries, it can be in the form of electronic industry, it can be in the form of service sector. So all those sectors which have all these important imperatives, that which is fulfilled in the form of an organization is called as a high value sector, and you have a low value sector which is informal in nature. So ideally, what should happen when there is growth? There should be a constant movement, gradual movement from the low sector to the high sector, but that is not happening, says the author of this article. In India, what is currently happening is you have one low sector, people are moving from one low sector to another sector instead of moving from low sector to the higher sector. So it means there is increasing informalization. The growth that should have reflected in this particular job creation is not happening, is one of the concerns voiced by the author. So what is that the government will have to do? So the government will have to come up with what is called as the policy interventions. So what are these policy interventions? Come up with new schemes, come up with new programs, and also make sure that people are employed with jobs as well. So what is the policy intervention here? One is about job creation, the other is about decent wages as well. Only job creation will not suffice. Why? There can be people in informal sector as well. So creation of jobs along with decent wages, along with job security, and with less tension in that particular job is what needs to be accommodated under the policy intervention. So all these issues in COVID-19 and in the near future means that the government will have to take certain periodic interventions, that is for creation of jobs and at the same time decent wages as well. What are the other measures that the government will have to take amidst the COVID-19 crisis? The government will have to make sure that there is employment generation programs which should be in coordination with the local governments. Why local governments? Because they will have enough statistics about the employment as well. Whether it is Panchayati Raj or the municipal corporation, you bring in multiple sectors, multiple coordinating agencies, government, private and civil society. Try to bring as many jobs as possible. Either it can be private or it can be government, or you can also bring in the civil society, ask their suggestion and bring in more changes when it comes to the job creation. So what is the most important factor here? One is the local accommodation, and for this what we require is the financial resources. So once financial autonomy is given to these local governments, they would be able to fulfill the cause of job creation, is the first major suggestion given under this article. The second major suggestion is employment intensive investment policies. This investment can be made by the private or it can be made by the government as well. Only thing that we have to make sure is that there are job creation that happens in the urban areas as well as in the rural areas. The author further goes on to say, if there is an investment made by the private entrepreneur, there has to be a conducive atmosphere both for the private entrepreneur as well as for the labor. What do we usually see? Because we have dilution of labor laws, because they are given the flexibility to change it every now and then, sometimes it is the labor who are the major sufferers. They are hired as well and they are fired from the companies as well. So who are the sufferers? It is the labor. But at the same time, it should not be at the discount of not making profits for the private entrepreneurs as well. So a balance between the private entrepreneurship for the profits and the labor laws has to be kept up. So this conducive atmosphere has to be created by the government of that particular region. The third element is about prioritizing the urban infrastructure. What we currently have is something called as the capital intensive approach. So what is this capital intensive approach? Let's say for example, we have huge number of machines that are employed, and it is these machines that are replacing the humans. This is fair enough because humans will not be able to do so much of work, but the author suggests an alternative strategy where the capital intensive approach, at least temporarily, should be replaced by labor intensive approach. Why? Because we have a current scenario where large number of jobs are being stripped off. So what we require is capital approach being replaced by labor intensive approach. So what are we supposed to do? When we create such infrastructure projects in the urban areas, this will give rise to employment, this will give rise to earnings, and this will also contribute to small enterprise formation as well. So what should we do? We should replace the capital intensive wherever possible by the government with what is called as the labor intensive approach. This might be a temporary approach, but this will also give more chances to the people for their employment opportunity. The fourth important factor is with respect to urban employment scheme. We have the Manrega when it comes to the rural economy. We also require number of schemes and programs when it comes to the urban sector as well. What should we do? We should start building large scale medical, health and sanitation infrastructure projects. When this is initiated, the unemployed youth in this particular sector of urban areas can be employed and they need not have to go back to their natives, is the fourth argument given by the author. Another important factor is with respect to the Manrega as well. There is a saturation point and there is an optimum level where they can also take up the number of people who can be part of Manrega. Let's say for example in Manrega you can accommodate around 100 people or maximum about 200 people in a specific region. This is the optimum, this is the maximum that you can accommodate, but after a point Manrega alone cannot accommodate every single person even in the rural areas. So what should the government do? The government should come up with alternative sources of employment and generate decent urban jobs who are looking for jobs. So the need of the hour is, apart from Manrega, we also have to make sure that there are alternative sources of employment where people can look up to the government sector, can look up to the private sector and can also look up various other provisions so that they can find the job in the COVID-19 period. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about three organs of the state. As we usually know, we have something called as legislature, we have something called as executive and the judiciary. The three organs of the state: the legislature makes laws, the executive implements the laws, the judiciary interprets all these laws. When it comes to who is the dominating force, none of them are, but an additional or a comparative edge is given to the executive. Why? Because they are the ones who control the financial resources. Because they have financial resources at their disposal, it is also the executive who would be able to demand and command and have all type of information when it comes to the financial resources. So when the executive has these financial resources, they are also accountable as well. Who are they accountable? They are accountable to the parliament. Who are they accountable? They are accountable to the people of India as well. So the executive who has all the information about a particular conduction of an activity or a scheme or a program will have to be accountable both to the parliament and also to the people as well. When it comes to this particular scenario, we have some of the issues like the COVID-19, we also have the India-China issue, and we also have couple of issues that is surrounding that is also the economic situation as well. So what are the issues here? One is the COVID-19, India-China issue, and also the economic situation. So what should the executive do? The executive will have to give all the information, the status of these parameters, the numbers, the issues, the debts and the infrastructure improvements made by the central government. The author, as he discusses this particular point of view, he takes the historical precedent into picture. He says that war and virus have become a deadly cocktail. Why? Because he takes the example of World War I, and it is during this period there was the Spanish pandemic which struck as well. So what happened? We have the World War I from the year 1914 up until 1918 as well, and we also have the Spanish pandemic which also struck during 1918 as well. What happened? The world was actually witnessing something horrific during this period. On one side there were soldiers who were butchered in the name of World War I, and there was the Spanish pandemic which were also killing people as well. One such example that we can take was Indian soldiers who were fighting for the British. They were operating in different countries, and after the end of World War, these countrymen came back to India. So after they came back to India, they entered the remote and rural areas as well. The minute they entered the remote and rural areas, they carried with them this particular disease. The author here draws a comparison of the historical context with the present scenario. He says there were rich people, people who were traveling to other countries. It is these people who have brought the virus to India as well. Then it enters the city limit, and from the city limit through the migrants, it goes to the rural areas, and it is now entering the rural areas and the hinterlands as well. Now is the point of executory order. When it comes to the executive, it is they who also implement the laws, who have to make sure that people do not suffer. So when it comes to the public health, they will have to start infusing a lot of money, and they will have to make sure that infrastructure is provided such that in case there is an increase of the COVID-19 in the rural areas, the government and the health infrastructure is capable enough to manage it is the first point. The second factor is with respect to China as well. With respect to China, we are not sure what exactly is happening across the line of actual control. So when it comes to this information, the government, that is the executive, will also have to give information to the parliament, to the general public as to what is happening along the line of actual control. So dealing with China will require pragmatism and diplomatic engagement constantly, says the author of this article. Our initial point of discussion was about questioning the authority of the executive. So who does that? The second pillar of the state, and that happens to be the legislature. In spite of the pandemic, the parliament was called in and they meet as well. That is really appreciable. But the problem is doing away with the question hour. So the question hour was done away with, and the parliament was not able to have enough deliberations, discussions, and were not able to ask questions to the executive of India. And at the same time, the legislature, apart from having the due deliberations and discussions, should also have an eye on the executive as well. In case there are laws that are passed by the government of the day which are draconian in nature, or there is passing of the ordinance which strips off the individual liberties, or in the name of pandemic, if speech is also taken away, or there are new laws which will bring in the surveillance state, such should be monitored by the legislature. That is the parliament. So what should happen ideally? The legislature should question the executive in the form of deliberations, discussions, and all viewpoints, so that the executive of the day is kept accountable in the parliament, and the same information is given out to the public, and the public are aware about what are the executive decisions taken by the government. The third important pillar is the judiciary. When it comes to the judiciary, justice delayed is justice denied. We all know about it. There was questions raised about demonetization, there were questions raised about electoral bonds, but there was no timely hearing. Then we have Article 370, Citizenship Amendment Act, habeas corpus petitions with respect to Jammu and Kashmir. They were again not heard by the judiciary as well. So what should the judiciary do? It should show some autonomous mind, act in an independent matter, and should always speak up against the executive excesses. Because if they are not speaking, what we will not be able to stop is the misadventure of the parliament and the government of the day. So the judiciary here will have to make sure that the executive and the legislature do not take up too much of powers which will take away the rights of the people. So the guardian of the Constitution of India, that is the judiciary, the Supreme Court, will have to make sure that it listens to all important cases and periodic decisions are given on a timely basis. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Mekedatu project. Karnataka has proposed two dam projects across Kaveri near Mekedatu, which happens to be in the Ramnagara district of Karnataka. What is this Mekedatu project? We have the IT capital of India, which currently is facing a lot of water issues. Bangalore as a region does not have water resources of its own. Even if it does have, they are barely minimal. So Bangalore is using as much as possible the groundwater resources. We also have couple of reports that have been showcased in the world as well as in India, that Bangalore is bound to suffer because of maximum extraction of groundwater. So what do we require? We require alternative sources of water, where water is got from a river to this particular region of Bengaluru. One of the important regions where we get the water is from the Krishna Raja Sagar. Apart from this, we may also require other resources as well. One such resource where Bangalore is expected to get water is through this particular project of Mekedatu. So where is this Mekedatu? It is in Ramnagaram district. So what happens? There would be diversion of water from this particular area to Bangalore as well. So one of the important objective of this Mekedatu project is to provide drinking water facility to the region of Bengaluru. and this project is also expected to generate hydroelectricity to meet the power demands of the state as well. As this project was initiated by the government of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu has objected to this project. They have also moved the Supreme Court. Why? Because they feel the minute this project is initiated by the government of Karnataka, the flow to the state of Tamil Nadu will also comparatively reduce as well. Why? Because the minute there is construction of the dam in this particular region, the flow and the allocation to the Tamil Nadu state will drop, says the Tamil Nadu government. The Tamil Nadu government also says that project is a violation of the final award of the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal. In this particular backdrop, what happens? They go to the Supreme Court of India. But the Karnataka government is likely to take a delegation which is headed by the Chief Minister to bring pressure on the central government to approve the construction of the Mekedatu reservoir. Kindly remember, previously it has also received approval from the Union Water Resource Ministry for the detailed project report and is also awaiting approval from the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Once we have an approval from the Ministry of Environment or we have the judgment passed by the Supreme Court of India, let's take up this analysis once again. As of now, this is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says scientists find life harboring gas on Venus. There was an announcement made by international astronomers who now say that there is phosphine gas which has been detected in the Venus planet. In this particular backdrop, let's try and understand what is this phosphine gas and what could be the implications in the near future. When it comes to the phosphine gas, this is nothing but a colorless, flammable and very toxic gas. This phosphine is used in agricultural fumigant, which is used in killing of the pests, and at the same time it is also used in the semiconductor industry in small amounts as a dopant. This is about the industrial advantage, but there is also a biological process as well. What is this biological process? There are some species of bacteria that survive in the absence of oxygen. When they survive in such an atmosphere, they release what is called as phosphine. So the minute they release phosphine, it means there is presence of the bacteria, there is presence of the microbes, and there could be a possibility of life as well. So in earth, what we have is the bacteria or the microbes which release the phosphine gas, and that means there is presence of life on earth. Does this now mean that there is life on Venus? The answer to this is yes as well as no. The scientific community is looking into it. They assume that there could be a possibility of life because of phosphine release that is taking place in the Venus, and at the same time they are not sure as well that is it only because of the microbes. So as of now, the answer is yes as well as the no. Yes, because there is phosphine, and no, because they are not 100% sure that it is only because of the microbes, but it can be other sources as well. Also remember, Venus cannot actually support life as per the historical precedents. Why? Because it is close by to the sun and the temperature of the Venus is too high and the atmosphere is highly acidic, and just two of these things make life impossible when it comes to the Venus. What is the significance of this finding? There could be more countries who would now want to explore the Venus as well. We have number of countries which have launched missions as well from the year 1960, and now what we will have is future missions to the Venus which should now attune to the investigation, further finding out evidence with respect to whether there is life in Venus or there is no life in Venus. So what we will have is more missions planned by different countries which should want to explore, and they would also want to find out if there is life in Venus. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says center opposes move to recognize same-sex unions. Kindly remember, we have an elaborate analysis about the LGBT rights and the judgment given by the Supreme Court of India recorded by Samatsa. So the link for the same will also be given in the description box, so kindly look into it. Once we have more updates with respect to this issue, we will have an elaborate analysis for this issue. As of now, you only have to know the judgment, so we will give the link in the description box. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. With reference to Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, which of the following statement is or correct? It allowed the British to arrest any person without any trial. It empowered the police to search for a place without a warrant. It placed severe restrictions on the freedom of press. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, when we are speaking about the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act of 1919, this is nothing but the Rowlatt Act or the Black Act. So this was one of the scenarios where the British came up with an act which restricted the freedom of press, as well as any person could have been arrested without any trial as well. So the purpose of the act was to curb the growing nationalism in India. This is where Gandhiji also pictures in, and he asks the people to perform satyagraha against such oppressive acts unveiled by the government of British back then. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. He was a Tamil writer, poet, journalist, Indian independence activist, and a social reformer from Tamil Nadu. His work included fiery songs, kindling patriotism during the Indian independence movement. He advocated greater rights for women and their education. One of his works include Gnanaratham. The above statements best describe: is it Subramanya Bharatiyar, Chidambaram Pillai, Rajagopalchari, or Subramanya Shiva? The answer to this is Subramanya Bharatiyar. Now let's look into the next practice question. Adyar Rivers flows through the state of, is it Kerala, Telangana, Karnataka, or Tamil Nadu? The answer to this is Tamil Nadu. Why have we taken both these practice questions? Because of the reference given under this article. With respect to Adyar River, it originates near Chembarabakam Lake in Kanchipuram district in the state of Tamil Nadu. So kindly remember about Adyar River. And when it comes to Subramanya Bharati, he is also popularly known as Mahakavi Bharati. He was a pioneer of modern Tamil poetry and is considered one of the greatest Tamil literary figures of all time. So he was a person who fought for the independence of India. He wanted to remove caste as well. He wanted to make sure that there's no caste system in the Hindu society and fought against the caste system. He was one of the people who also visualized a modern Indian woman as the vanguard of the society. He was of the strong opinion that the world will have proper knowledge and intellect if both men and women are deemed equal. What did he do? He advocated equal rights for the women as well. One, he fought against the caste. The other, he also fought for equal treatment for both men as well as women. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following is or correctly matched? We have the Human Capital Index released by the World Economic Forum, Global Competitive Index, World Bank, Global Hunger Index by the World Health Organization. Which of them are correctly matched? The answer to this is none. Why? Let's look into the explanation. We have the Human Capital Index, which is released by the World Bank, Global Competitive Index released by the World Economic Forum, and the Global Hunger Index, which is released by Concern Worldwide as well as World Hunger Hilfe. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So this article is speaking about doing business report. It speaks about flaws when it comes to the estimation as well. The entire analysis for this particular issue has been explained on 31st August 2020. But there are some of the add-on points as well. What are these? Several indications of the doing business survey presumes that there should be less regulation when it comes to the government. Let's say, for example, if the government is focusing on the impact of the ecology, the climate change, and the work protection, that is when the government is not right, says the doing of the business report. So this will have to be changed in the near future, because climate change is also an aspect, development is also an aspect, health is also an aspect, and labor rights is also an aspect as well. So all these rights will have to be considered by the World Bank when it is coming up with the new report, says the author of this article. So basically, it is not only about flexible rules, it is about right intention of the government that should also be taken into picture, says the author of this article. But for the rest of the issue, kindly look into our 31st August 2020's analysis. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Kondapochamma Reservoir, which of the following statements is or correct? It is part of Kaleshwaram lift irrigation project. The reservoir was constructed as part of Telangana's government efforts to make Krishna a perennial river. The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is not the Krishna river, but instead it is the Godavari river. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. But to understand what is this Kaleshwaram lift irrigation project, the link for the same will also be provided in our description box. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about Finance Commission. It is a quasi-judicial body. The chairman should be a person having experience in economics. Members are not eligible for reappointment. Which of the above statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is 2 and 3. Why? Because the chairman should not have experience in economics, but instead it is public affairs, and at the same time all the members are eligible for reappointment. So both the statements 2 and 3 are wrong. So the answer is 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Kindly excuse me for the pronunciation. Nioghalvfjerdsfjorden is a fjord located in northwestern Finland, Sweden, northeastern Russia, as well as northeastern Greenland. The answer to this is northeastern Greenland. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is in the northeastern part of Greenland. What is this whole issue? There is one of the glaciers which has broken off at this particular point. Why? That is due to climate change. Why? That is due to warmer temperatures. Because there has been increasing temperature, increasing warmth, there has shattered a section of Greenland ice shelf, says this particular article. So the loss is further evidence of what scientists speak about with reference to the climate change as well as that which is taking place in Greenland. Also remember, what you see on top is only a small part of the ice, but beneath you will have huge ice that is present. So what will happen? Because of the climate change, you will have melting of the ice on top and also on the lower part as well, which means there is increase of the water, and this will become a catastrophe to the coastal areas as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. The mind of the makers of the Constitution of India is reflected in which of the following? Is it preamble, fundamental rights, DPSP, or fundamental duties? The answer to this is preamble. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Despite higher economic growth in recent years, working poverty in India remains high. What policy interventions are needed for securing the livelihood of workers in urban areas? Explain with suitable examples how the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary keep a check on each other. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.